My name's Tristan. I am a student in the master's program for Library Science and Information at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And what I want to do today is to catalog an entire rare book start to finish with you. I'm also a graduate assistant at the Rare Book and Manuscript Library, and this is a book that I cataloged pretty much from scratch. Just about a week ago, and so it's still pretty fresh in my memory. We're going to basically go from this is basically the record that I had to start with. Basically, just a little bit of a title, one name, uh, the editor, which isn't correct, the language, where it was published, when, how long the book is, and that's about it. Um, we're going to work off of a different copy today, but it should basically be almost exactly the same as the one we have, and we're going to work off of that. Um, there's a lot of different approaches to cataloging. In library, there's kind of two hands of cataloging. There's the copy cataloging, and then there's original cataloging. A lot of the work that gets done in a rare book library is what's called original cataloging. And I guess technically this is copy cataloging. It's complex copy cataloging, but this is just such a minimal record that I would say we're basically going to start from scratch and do an original record. And I'm showing you all of this is what a cataloger actually looks at. And this is a better view of it. But this is basically what the cataloger is sitting at their desk. If you wonder, well, what does a rare book cataloger do? They start from basically a blank page and they end up with something like this. But for you, the user, it gets put into this nice thing that it's called an OPAC, or an online public access catalog, and it makes it look nice. It tells you what these things are instead of like this obscure number um, format called MARC. But if you click Display Source Record on anything, at least in UIUC's catalog, you can see what the cataloger sees. And this is actually more precise. Sometimes you lose some information by going here, and that's why they actually let you see the source record. But today we're going to go from basically 0 to this record here that I made, like I said, about a week ago. The reason why I think that you should watch this video is because, well, or the reason why I'm making the video is because I've gone through YouTube a number of times using a bunch of, and I basically cannot find a video like this where someone sits down with you and starts from 0 and ends up with a record. This is going to be a very long process, and I think this is the reason why no one makes this kind of video, is because everyone always says, oh, well, you learn it on the job. Well, you learn cataloging on the job. Oh, you just have to catalog some books. Well, it's actually it kind of not annoys the cataloger. Some people really like to train people, but this is just one opportunity that I want to give you to sit down and just see how it's done. Um, and I'm gonna try to explain as if you have a little bit of cataloging knowledge, like you know. So I put my objective here: learn one way to perform original cataloging on a simple European hand press book, applying all the relevant standards, including MARC, technically MARC 21, RDA, DCRMB, ISBD, LC subject and name authorities, and these are standards used by rare book libraries and more. Um, if that sounds like a lot, then you can still watch if you're interested in it, and you'll learn all these standards kind of in your practice. But this is actually sometimes cataloging classes they tell you about these standards, and then you, at least in my intro to cataloging class, they told you about the standards, and then you did some copy cataloging, and then they just threw you out. And I went to, my job, and they said, okay, catalog this book. And I just sat there and like, I don't know how to actually go from the standards to doing the catalog record because they had just trained us in copy cataloging. And I think it's really not that hard. It's just, especially with rare book cataloging, you're trying to be precise. You're trying to describe the book, and you're trying to describe the book as it presents itself. The main standard that we're using is DCRMB, which is Descriptive Cataloging of Rare Materials for Books. They have standards for manuscripts, for music, for serials, for I think even some other things, but we're just going to focus on books today. And, if you have knowledge of the above standards, then this is going to be a lot more, it's going to make more sense. And then another book that I would really recommend is Philip Gaskell's A New Introduction to Bibliography. It'll make this make a lot more sense as well, especially when I start getting into collation and signature statements. But again, and that's another thing where I'm going to go through and do the entire signature and statement collation of this book, and that's going to take probably the bulk of the time. So I'll try to figure out how to make timestamps in YouTube so that you can, and I'm assuming this is going to be uploaded to YouTube, but it might be redistributed in some other way too. So you might just have to swim around if you want to kind of skip through some of that. But I am going to go through every single page in this book because I think it's important to know that and see someone actually do that and know how long it takes. Like I said, this is going to be like over an hour probably. And this is why they don't want to hire too many. I mean, why rare book catalogers are a rare breed, both because they need you to have the patience to go through and do this, and then also it's actually extremely expensive to catalog a rare book because if you're paying a cataloger $25, $30 an hour, and they catalog, they can make one record in an hour if they have no distractions, and if it's a very simple book like this, that means that, every book that the library gets, it's going to be another $30+ on top of the book. Now, for extremely expensive books, maybe, that's going to be the case. But actually, a lot of items at the Rare Book Library are not, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're just kind of however much, $100, $200, and that could really add up. I mean, it really adds up. So this is the ideal standard to which an item would be cataloged. But in reality, turn this do not disturb on. In reality, not every book is going to get this level of detailed treatment. And I've only been able to do this because it's actually not my main job to catalog rare books at the Rare Book Library. But I get some time to do it when I usually staff the front desk. So I get some time to basically, since it's been slower during the coronavirus, less people coming in, and so I can have a book up at my desk and be cataloging while waiting for. And when a reader comes in, I have to stop. But I was kind of proud of this one. A lot of work that I think it looks really. It's nice to look at a record like this and say, yes, I made that from scratch, pretty much. So without further ado, we're just going to crack open this book and start looking at it. This is a writing tablet I have here. You can actually see as I write. And that might be helpful just to do notes as we go through the book. So first, the anatomy of this book. So this is obviously a bound book. It has a cover. You open it up, it has an inner cover and an end paper, and then we get the title page. If you're experienced in rare book cataloging, and you're watching this video for some reason, there's going to be a lot left out. If I make a mistake, I will correct myself, hopefully during the video sometime, but then also I'm going to make a list of my mistakes in the description, and I'm going to put those first, and make sure you read those before watching the entire video, and just know that there's going to be mistakes and omissions because this is kind of a complicated process, but we will try to trudge through that. So our title page is, according to descriptive cataloging for rare books, the preferred source of information for the item, for basically the main metadata about the item, including the title and the publication information down here. The less preferred place, but more common in many older books, such as this one, is at what's called the colophon. This will actually become important a little later on, but you have kind of the end of the book as well, and it looks like we have an index kind of at the end. So just giving you a little overview, as if kind of you're just flipping through the book when you first get it, because you just kind of want to see, like, okay, what do the pages look like? Are they all on pretty much the same paper, or is it kind of like a Frankenstein book where there's a bunch of different kinds of paper? And you want to look at the center here and just make sure, do a quick evaluation of the book for preservation purposes and conservation to see if it has any mold, which is often going to be in this center area right here, and if there's any other sorts of oddities, like obviously pages are torn out or something right at the beginning. You should kind of know what you're getting into. And then also just to see that it's going to be strong enough to withstand going through every single page and flipping through it. These are important things to keep in mind before you start just going at trying to catalog the book. The main things that you really need to have when you're cataloging, like to get a minimal record, a minimal, and I actually talk about like what the least you need for a quote unquote full level record in OCLC, which is basically saying that we've cataloged the book to a good standard that we don't really need to, you don't need to add more in order to have the basic objectives of cataloging for libraries. So what you need there is, I'm actually kind of, it's not really in order of importance, but we'll just go in the order of mark. This is the standard at the Rare Book and Manuscript Library as I understand it for UIUC, but if I get things wrong, I'm not I really need to stress it. I'm not representative of RBML. I'm doing this completely from my own knowledge and experience as I've seen it, and talk to people about it. So you need to start out with, we need to get my remarkable tablet here so you can see what I'm writing. I'm going to put this here and then that there. You should be able to see. Yeah. So there's these things called fixed fields. Those are meant for library catalog searching, and they're important and they're actually really confusing, but just because I can't use the OCLC cataloging program on this computer, I'm not going to cover those here. But it probably justifies almost a separate video on how to deal with fixed fields. But for a minimal OCLC full level record, you need an 040 field. And if you're in Connection, which is the program that at least we use to enter these cataloging records into WorldCat, basically, uh, you have the 040 and then two blank indicators. First indicator, second indicator. I'm not going to comment too much on the indicators, but I'm going to use them for people who know some mark, and then not really try not to confuse people who do know mark. I will comment on them a little bit because they're important. There's some specialties. So what you see here is you have CUD, B, ENG, E, RDA, E, DCRMB, and this is basically me declaring the standard. So the first one is who originally cataloged it. The A, I'm going to use the symbol that we use $signs in our internal catalog, but in OCLC you'll see this like double dagger symbol. It's easier to write. CUD stands for A. This means that Cambridge University originally put this into OCLC. The B means that the language of cataloging, not the language of the book, but the language of cataloging is English. The and this is called subfield. So subfield E is DCRMB, descriptive cataloging for rare materials books. And then subfield E, we use it again to say that we're also doing RDA. And I got the order wrong, but it doesn't really matter for the two E's. Not wrong, but just different from what's on what you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen. And then we do, the C is repeated for Cambridge just because that's how it is. D is OCLCQ, that's automatically added. It just means quality control, which it doesn't always really control the quality. And then you get the subfield D, UIU, which means it was updated by University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. The next field that you need is an 092, or it could be, I think, 090 maybe for Library of Congress. But what this is, it's a number in a classification system, and it's not really it's just basically meant to be a suggestion, so that a copy cataloger can go in there and say, this is the Dewey Decimal number, or I use Dewey Decimal because we use Dewey Decimal at the Rare Book and Manuscript Library. But you can also use Library of Congress, but you need a different mark field for that. I think it's 090. I haven't seen this a whole lot. I think this is a very local practice, but some equivalent is necessary for that minimal level OCLC record. And when I say minimal, it's there's actually a different thing for minimal, but the lowest level of full cataloging in OCLC. And so let's see. 092. So 092, the 0 here for in 092 Dewey means that we're using a full Dewey Decimal System book. We're not using it like they have abbreviated books. If you did an abbreviated book, it'd be a 1, but we have the full set of instructional books. And there's no second indicator. And we have A, so we put our number in 223.2. And what this means is 200 is religion, Bible, Psalms. Okay, what just trust me that 223.2 in Dewey Decimal System version 20 edition 23 is Psalms. That's just a comment. Psalms. So that's how it works. Probably too much time spent on 092, but it's something that I was like, what's going on here? So that's what's going on there. It's something, and I think that's why I'm making this video, is because it's these like local, you might not have this exact same local practice, but you should be familiar with, if you're ever going to catalog a rare book, that there are these weird extra local practice things that matter, that you need to be able to kind of parse and think about in this kind of, you need to be able to translate mark speak into human speak. The 100 field is our main entry. There's a lot of theoretical things about what constitutes the main entry. In this case, I actually got the record originally, and it said that Saint Bonaventure was the author, and it claims that on the title page. This is the tricky part about rare books, is sometimes they lie. Sometimes the printer thought it was written by this person, and it turns out I had to do some research in this old Latin tome here, that basically they determined that it was actually written by this Jean de Langeais, Bishop of Limoges, I don't know, but is actually by this person, and that's just how it ended up at the end of the day. So we use a 100, and then we use a first indicator of 1 to indicate that this is controlled. This is coming from Library of Congress, name authority. And I think it's actually important to show what this looks like. So there's this website, and it's called ClassWeb. And a good cataloger is going to have this pretty much open all the time. The login here is you don't have, I have to just go to main menu. And so there's this menu, you go to LC name authority, and we're going to search. And yeah, it's easy to guess. I can't give a password, but that was actually from my cataloging class. I think it's just for all of you IUC. So name heading. So the way you search for names is you have to do last first, and then it just goes to the left. Or from left to right. So I'm just going to type in Langeais. I actually had to, I was only given the Latin name of the person. And so I had to find out what the real name of the person was in Library of Congress speak. So I come here and I search for him, and usually it should be that there's like an added entry for his other name, but it turns out that he's not important enough to really, for even anyone to even like know or make the connection that this guy's Latin name, which has nothing to do with this, it doesn't look like this at all, is actually him. But I did all that work for you. So what you actually can do if you're actually cataloging, you can literally just copy paste this in and change the $ to that double dagger. And you can copy, and even with the 1 there, copy that in, you got your 100 field. You do in RDA, in rare book cataloging, you do need to add this extra thing, which is an E for And E is called a relationship designator. And you use things like author or contributor or editor, and you can tell like what kind, well, you don't just say like, okay, that's the main entry, because the main entry could actually be a lot of different things. In this case, it's the author, and we actually indicate that. In addition to the controlled Library of Congress thing, because he could have been an editor, he could have been many things. So in this case, he's the author. Next thing that we need, and we'll just say, look at left, it's right there. The 245. This is the title. We're going to come back to this because there's an entire discipline of just how you transcribe the title for rare books. And that is very detailed. So other things that we have are 246s, which are basically alternative titles. And those are just for extra info. They're not required in that OCLC full level record, but they're nice to have. 264 is the publication statement. So if you look over to the left and right, 264, and it'll show up in just a moment. But for 264, first indicator is null, and then generally we almost always, especially for like early printed books like this, we always use a 1 because we just consider whatever information we get or can parse out is going to be the publication information. For things that aren't on the title page, we put in brackets. In this case, we do start out, we do sometimes have to rearrange things just a bit in order to get that A, B, C, which A is the location, B is the publication statement, and C is the date. So this is where I was telling you that the title page versus colophon becomes important. We're going to go more in detail over the transcription, so I'm going to do this with the title, but I will say that we get this publication statement here, and then we get the date and the location. We actually have to go all the way to the back of the book. Flip to back to the colophon, which tells us that Claudius Chevallon printed it in the date 1542 in Paris. So we'll just say that we have successfully transcribed this information. Then we go on to the extent statement. And we need that is the 300 field. So in the 300 field, there's no indicators, and the A tells us basically it's a very basic collation. And a collation is basically just accounting for all of the leaves in the book. We also get that there's one illustration, and we actually spell that out now. Used to not be spelled out, and we can say that it's a woodcut. And then we do this C, which tells us how tall it is and what the format is, and it is an octavo. And we don't use a period because we have this what's called a terminal punctuation already, which is that closed parentheses. One thing that's important is we use space, comma, space, and we use space, semicolon, space as punctuation here. And in general, something that it took me a real long time to figure out, and I'm still making mistakes, is the exact spacing for all these things. That is important. It can mess up display, it can mess up searching if you don't get the spacing right. And there's different, let's see if I can, I should have had it ready. But in general, that's going to be something that is important. 336, moving on, 336 to 338 are the standard cookie cutter RDA, basically boilerplate information for RDA. And at least where I am, World OCLC Connection actually, they have a macro where basically you just click a couple buttons and it fills it in. If you have something that's not a standard book, it can also has like a little wizard and it helps you get the right RDA text there. That is required. Anything with the 500 in it are going to be notes. Generally, those aren't required, but you really should have at least one note because there's going to be something to note, especially in a book printed before 1900. There's going to be some kind of note that you really need to mention. You need at least one subject in there. In this case, a subject is going to, for something like anything relating to the Bible, actually, the subjects for Library of Congress aren't great. I'd like to learn and be able to use like ATLA subject to source headings because I feel like that would be a lot more precise, but it's not in the scope of really what I have time to be able to. And I'm not even sure if that's even allowed to be used or if they have to be like licensed to be used or only ATLA can use them. But those are a vocabulary for religious studies terms. So we use this 0 to indicate that it's from Library of Congress, and I'm not going to go through exactly how to create this subject heading, but suffice to say that this is Bible, and then, so it's talking about, the book is about. The subject is the aboutness of a work. So in this case, it's about the Bible, and it's hard to subdivide to say like Psalms and such, but that might be possible. But in this case, it's acceptable. And then we have a form subdivision of commentaries. Put a period. Something that's not required, but we'll come back to later, is this hierarchical place name designation. France, Paris, just saying where, in a kind of a more readable way. And then the other thing that if this information is available, you need it in your minimal level, full level record. I'm going to keep saying that, but in your lowest descriptive level of full level records, you really need to record all of like the published names with the book, or at least like the quote unquote important ones. If there's like 30 people, maybe you don't record everyone. You might record like the top editors or like the funders or things like that. But it depends, and that's something that's really dependent on local practice and your judgment. Cataloger's discretion is the thing. 700 means that it's a person, and that's going to appear over here momentarily, yes. And in this case, I put a couple attributed names, and I'll just explain those right now. An attributed name in this case is the book has been attributed to this person. So at one point, the book was, I might actually even flip these. I'm going to do the second one first. So at first it was attributed to, and again, that 0 means it's coming from Library of Congress, and we don't use that second indicator. They thought it was coming from Bonaventure. Bonaventure. And then the C here is saying that the is basically giving more information about disambiguation, as you might know the word from Wikipedia, saying, well, which Bonaventure? Well, it's the saint and cardinal, and his dates were approximately 1217 to 1274. And we use that relationship designator again, attributed name, in this case, not the author. It's more obvious in the next one that now later on people thought, well, we don't know who wrote it, so we're just going to call it by pseudo Bonaventure, by the false Bonaventure, person who wasn't Bonaventure but used his name. Yada, yada, yada. And again, attributed name. We also were able to find this printer. Again, the way you would find that if you were trying to look is, actually, let's just imagine that we're looking at the book and we see, okay, Claudie Chou-Allon. Well, so we start with his last name, and that U actually has to get turned to a V. So, and I'm not sure exactly how his name ends, so I'm actually going to just type in the first bit. That would be cool if I could copy that and it just like actually was able to OCR that. Let's see how good they are. Name authority, search. No, doesn't get that at all. Cheval, and then you can just actually stop there because it does what's called left truncation. And this is a lot. So let's see if we. So we actually have to see, well, which Cheval. Well, we know it's Chevelon Claude. Just make sure. Yeah, Claude, Claudie. Claude is going to be the same person. When we come over here, we'll come here to mark display. And we just have to look, okay, is this going to be, it looks like if he was alive, 1479 to 1537, he was a printer, printer and bookseller, Chevalius. So these are all extra information to make sure that we have the right guy. And that looks like the right guy. So we can copy paste this 100 field 101 and then add printer to that relationship designator right there. Okay. So now that we've got, basically this is, if you just did this information, you would be able to call your record a full level record in OCLC and WorldCat. And it turns out there's more to it though. So we're going to go through and do all of that. I'm going to start out with, so a lot of people might say we'll start out with the title page, but something that I like to just get under control first is the extent, the collation. These are all different words for basically saying, do you have the whole book? And what did the whole book look like if you don't? Because sometimes you're able to tell even if you don't have the full book. Some books would have like what's called a register, and they would say, oh, this is what the whole book looks like. This one doesn't have that, so you have to kind of do it by hand. Generally, we don't include the cover because covers can vary and change over time. We start with what's called the text block, which is everything within the cover that it's printed. And that might not even be the most precise way to say it, but the text block is basically the content between the covers. So we have our title page. Great. How do I want to put it? The title page is sometimes not counted as like a real page In this book it is, and it actually makes it much easier, so I don't really have to talk about that. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to shrink this just a little bit because I want to get this in here. So hopefully you can still kind of read that, because what's going to happen is, this is what I'm warning you about. It's already been 40 minutes, and we're going to go through every single page of this book and be very precise about recording information about what we see. There's these things called a signature statement, and in this case, it's actually extremely helpful to record that signature statement because there's no page numbers. What they would do is they would print, in this case, a bunch of pages onto one bigger page, and then they'd fold it up and put it together. And if you read and see some diagrams from the Gaskell piece book that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you will be able to have a lot greater understanding of what's going on here. But just bear with me. We're going to make what's called a signature statement, and that's going to tell us everything we need to know about whether this book is complete or not. So we start with the title page. Great. And this is basically page 1. Another piece of book anatomy that we have to talk about is these books are counted in leaves, or sometimes they're called folios, but this title page is actually on the same leaf as this page right here that starts with Extract des Registres de Parlement. It's actually the same physical page, so you can imagine it's the same physical page. So that's actually what's being counted in this book, and not so much the like page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. That's not how it's working here. So you have to kind of change your mindset on what you're looking for. We call the front page of the page the recto. We call the back the verso. So this is actually like page 1 recto, and then we go back, and instead of saying it's page 2, we say it's page 1 verso, page 2 recto, page 2 verso. So what you're going to be looking for when you're making this signature statement is this letter here. And there's these little letters, and you kind of have to really zoom in. It's like, what is that? That's an A. It's a double A, actually. So this is one. We set the 1, and we do 1R. It's going to take a sec to show up, but it'll be there. 1R is the title page, and then 1V is something else. We have, and we need a signature. Those letters down there are called a signature. And so what we get in the signature is AAIJ. What this means is that we're actually working with what's called signature AA, or it later gets abbreviated to 2A, but I like to just transcribe exactly what I see. So this is actually what this is saying is that this is the second leaf of the AA signature. So, and a quick note on transcription, we're going to get more into detail with this later. We have IJ, the J, I equals J in Latin at this time. So it's really just a typographic convention, and we actually transcribe it as II. In our personal notes, not in the record, but in our personal notes here, we're going to say it's 2AI. which is or 2. But in this case, we can actually, since this second leaf here is actually page 2 or leaf 2 of the lowercase a signature, it actually, we can infer that the title page, they just didn't want to put it on the title page because it'd make it look ugly, but it's actually A1. So that becomes important later, but we want to note that. So we'll go on to the next. This is, in modern day, this is called a spread with the left page and the right page. I'm going to call it a spread here, but that may or may not be the exact right terminology. But for this spread, we get A3. So we're going to do, well, actually, so this previous page was, go back, was 2 recto and 2 verso. And we got signatures for 2, actually, I made a mistake there. This is going to be it's on 2 recto. That you're only going to get these signature statements generally on the recto. Like I said, I'm transcribing. So 3 recto should be AA, I, J. Like I said, just the J is just typographic convention for another I, but, and then we get I, and then nothing. Then we get to A. So we'll actually write all of these out. So 3 recto, and remember that this is one physical page, one physical page, one physical page. 3 verso, 3 recto, 3 verso. Whoa. 4 recto, 4 verso. 5 recto, 5 verso. 6 recto, 6 verso. 7 recto, 7 verso. 8 recto, 8 verso, and we'll also go to 9 recto and 9 verso, because something actually happens right there. So this is A4 is going to be on 4 recto. A 1, 2, 3, 4. They don't use the IV usually. They just use 4 I's because they just stop after that. They just say, you figured it out. So there's actually going to be nothing on the 5 recto, nothing on the 6 recto, nothing on the 7 recto, nothing on the 8 recto. In the 9, we get just a single A. One lonely single A. Why do we go from AA to A? Well, the reason is because they want to print the preliminary matter. Like, this is what you're actually going through is like an alphabetical list of subjects, basically. They can't figure out where that's going to be in the book till after they print it because they're not exactly sure what page everything is going to end up on before it's actually on the page, because they're putting these letters in one at a time. So the AA basically meant, well, it goes before A. And they would have just told their bookbinder, look, this goes first. Put it first. Don't put it last, put it first. So that's actually going to be how it works. So now we're actually at the beginning of the main text of the book. Starts with A. And you're going to get this same pattern where we get A with the 2 with the IJ, so A2, A3, A4. And then you get A5, A6, A7, A8, B. Folio 9. So what this is actually, this is the the way this book is paged, it's not actually paged, but they are counting all of the folios. So it starts with folio 1 on the A signature. And so they're actually counting page, basically their page 1. They're saying that, you have the front of page 1 and you have the back of page 1. You have the front of page 2 and the back of page 2. And it goes like that the whole book. It turns out there's exactly 200, which ends up being written as CC, which you'll see appear on the page in just a moment. It turns out there's actually that many, so you want to keep track of that as well as these letters down here. At this point, what I can do is I can just write down what the letters are, because we do care about what the pagination is. We want to make a note if it gets wrong, but the important part are these letters here, because these letters were actually pretty much standardized pretty early on for all of what's called the hand press periods before they get big machines making books. This convention was pretty standard. It uses the Latin alphabet, which for our purposes does not include the letter J, does not include the letter V, and it does not include the letter W. So our usual 26-letter alphabet becomes a 23-letter alphabet. And we use that to abbreviate later, but just so you know that, they don't have the J signature. Well, they wouldn't have had a J signature. So that's actually okay. So we have AA, and then we have A. And as long as all of that A, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8, B. So we'll say, okay, we have B. We're going to make notes down here if anything's wrong. But B, B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B6, B7, B8, C. Great. C1, C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, C8, C9. Nope, C9 is D. Right, D. Notice we're on folio 25. So 26 is D2, D3, D4, D5, D6, D7, D8, E. What's going on here with all of these 8 physical page or leaf or folio sections is that these are actually like the front and back of the big sheet that they would have been printing that I told you about, and then folded up and then cut at the sides. That's actually like one unit. And so that's how they kept it together. They would put that one little letter there, and that would say, okay, this is all from that unit, and the bookbinder would be able to just put it in order correctly. So we have E, E, E2, E3, E4, E5, E6, E7, 8, and F. F2, F3, 4, 5, 6, 7, F8, and G. G1, G2, G3, G4, G5, G6, G7, G8, and H. H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, H7, H8, and L. L1, 2, sorry, I. HI, my alphabet. I2, I3, I4, I5, I6, I7, I8, I9 is K. There is no I9, of course. K, K1. So we remember we skip J, so we go straight to K. K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and L. Now we're at L. L2, L3, L4, L5, L6, L7, L8, and get to M. Do M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, M6, M7, M8, and N. Remember, I'm looking down here, so just kind of keep your eye focused on that section there. N, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and 8, and 9, O, O1, O2, O3, O4, O5, O6, O7, O8, O9, nope, P, great, P, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and Q. Q1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What comes after Q? R. Because E, F, G. Yeah, that's what comes after. I don't know why I thought U came after Q. Oh, because that's how it does in writing, but not in the alphabet, strangely. Q, R, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. S. Now, okay, this is S, I promise. This is what's called a long S. This really trips a lot of people up. You see it right here. It's not de fecundo, it's de secundo. And the S that we're familiar with only gets used at the end of words in Latin for the most part. So this is meus. So that looks like a normal S there. But if it gets used in the middle of a word, it's basically an F without the slash through it. You transcribe that as the S that we're familiar with. But it's the same S. It is an S. It's not an F. And F2, S1, wow, S2, S3, S4, S5, S6, S7, 8, and T. The T's look a little weird in the Gothic script, but T, they look almost like a K or an R, but it's a T2, T3, T4, T5, T6, T7, T8. Comes after T, not going to guess even. V, V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6, V7, V8, and X, because there's no U. X2, X3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And Y. Why are we still doing this? Because it's important and it actually lets you know that you have the whole book. The Y2, Y3, Y4, Y5, Y6, Y7, Y8, Y9. They just photograph, I promise you they just photograph this page twice. It's not, there's no Y9. And then it goes to Z. Their Z actually looks kind of like a cursive Z, but in Gothic script, coincidentally. But we have Z and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, what's going on here? So we move on to capital letters. This isn't always what happens, but I've seen it happen sometimes where you go from lowercase. Well, what do you do when you run out of lowercase? You go to capital letters. Sometimes they always do capital letters. And what do you do when you run out of capital letters? You go to lowercase letters? No, generally you go with double capital letters. But in this case, they chose to go from lowercase to capital letters. When you're writing the formula, that does matter. So you need to be writing in lowercase or uppercase, whatever you're seeing on the page. So we have A, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. B, B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. C, excuse me, 1, 2, 3. Here's something that tripped me up when I was first going through the book. They have de littera D, and I thought this was the signature D. I'm like, they got it wrong, but that's actually just like a section heading. The actual signature D comes there, even though it's in the same, almost the same place as you expect a signature mark to be. Very confusing. D2, D3, D4. Oh, where's D4? So I think this is D4, but some other catalogers, there's a German record that this is on in Germany that says that this isn't D4, that this is this was a print that was added in later. I think it's a woodblock, and I think that it was intended to be D4, because in my copy, at least, it looks like it's on the same paper. It's actually bound in the front in mine, but that's easily, it could have just fell off and then they pasted it in the front because they didn't know what to do with it. It's really up to you. I called it leaf D4, and in our copy I said that leaf D4 with this woodcut is bound in the front, but it could be that they're right, and that this was not original to the book, in which case D4 would be blank, and you actually have to note that in the statement. But something that we didn't note in this over here on the right is how many pages we had per. But so we're actually going to do that. We're going to say all of these had 8 leaves each, except for D, and then D was at the end. D had 4 leaves. Like I said, we're going to imagine either this or a blank leaf was the 4th leaf, because you can't print a page where it only ends up with 3 leaves. I won't explain why, but you just can't. You could, but you would have to intentionally do something really ridiculous. Ask your most enthusiastic rare book person in a different time how you would get what's called a gathering with 3 pages, and they'll laugh, an evil laugh, and then make you do it maybe. But that's the end of the book. Back cover. Ta-da! We're done. We don't actually count these end pages that aren't printed. But they might contain important information, so you need to look at them. In this case, they're blank, so you really need to think about them too much. So, how do we take this information on the right and turn it into some kind of coherent thing? Because this is too much information. It's not really, doesn't really make sense. So, in order to make what's called a signature statement, so these 8 leaves, and also, so something we need to mention, when you're actually looking at the book, you have to verify something, what's called the chain lines, and you'll see it doesn't really show up that well here, but they're going to be going like horizontal here, and so that's part of the information you need looking at the paper and how many pages are each. This is an octavo, which makes sense because it's about 17 centimeters tall, which is in the octavo range, and you'll do octavo and you'll say, this is how you're translating this information into what's called a signature statement. So it's octavo and colon, it is 2a, sorry, lowercase a, 2a, comma, a, so it's 2a, and then we need to indicate the 8, that there's 8 leaves per gathering In this case, it's just a one gathering of 2A or AA. And then we go to A through Z. This one was really nice because it just went through A to Z, no problems. So this is actually easy book, easy mode. Z8, and then we changed to uppercase, comma, we changed to uppercase letters, A through C, those are also an 8. And then we have to split off and say that the D only had 4 leaves. And that's our whole statement. Now we also want to make a note that leaf D4, and this is kind of more of an informal note, but leaf D4 is either blank or a woodcut. I'm not sure. Put a question mark in parentheses. We're not sure. And that's, but we're only going to really transcribe. We're just going to say this is it. 2A8, A to Z8, AC8D4. And that nice mathematical formula gets kind of maligned, but in the very specific world of hand press books printed in Europe, it's useful. And the way it looks like in the catalog, it ends up looking like this: 2A8, A to Z8, A to C8, superscript, and then D4, and then the octavo actually gets put in at the end. We put signatures for signatures, and that just gets a regular 500 note. So all that work for one 500 note? Come on, you gotta be kidding me. Well, that's how it works. The more important thing, that's optional. The more important thing is, for me, that I understand this to the point where I just do this, and then it makes this 300 easy. What's going on is, for this 300 is, what I'm going to do is we're going to get that. Where did my remarkable go? Okay. The 300 statement. So the way a 300 statement works is, I'm kind of going to just make a little box here. So both these signatures and the 300 field are recording what's called the ideal copy. So let's say that your copy that you're cataloging, and you're actually doing, you can even do this with original cataloging if you're, let's say it's missing this page right here, which would be leaf C7, no, C8. Leaf C8 was missing, where it says materium in hoc labello contenarum, and then index alphabeticus on this side. If this leaf was missing, just it got ripped out by accident or something, or not, you could actually infer that it should have been there and just be done with it and just say, like, you know what, I know it's going to be there, and you record that in a local note, which in our catalog actually appears different here. It's not part of this. You wouldn't see this in WorldCat. You have to go to our copy and our catalog to see this local note. And what's going on is the 300 is also what's called the ideal copy. You wouldn't, if you're missing, say, page 197 out of 200, but it's obvious that there was a page 197, or you know that there was, you don't put that in 300. You don't put, like, well, missing page, you put the missing page 297 in a 500 note and not in the 300. You have to try to imagine, there's some imagination that goes on, especially if you only have like one copy of a unique book, which happened to me once. You just have to imagine what's going on, kind of what it would have been. So the formula that you use is, I'm not going to handwrite it out, but I will try to explain it. In the A, it starts off with the A. 8 means that the first 8 pages were not numbered according to the, like it numbered the folios. The thing right here, that would actually, this 8 here in brackets, because it's not actually numbered, corresponds to the 2A superscript 8 signature or gathering. And actually, I made a mistake. I don't think this is, I don't know what changed it, but so, oh, you're right, you're right. I didn't, so, okay. Apparently, even though in the book the leaf numbers are in uppercase, the convention is if you have Roman numeral lettered pages, you transcribe them in, I think you are supposed to transcribe it in capital. So that's something that might partially depend on local practice. This isn't like a make or break it thing. Okay. But yeah, so CC, so instead of writing we don't write 200, we write CC because we're transcribing what this is claiming here, what it claims the page number is. Now, if it's wrong, let's say it said it ended on page like 200 if it like skipped a few pages or like added a few pages in for some reason. For some reason, this happens a lot. It says that there's 206 pages. And then, but really, i.e., 200, because there's actually only 200 pages. In the ideal copy, there's actually physically only 200. That's what's in the brackets, saying that, well, there's really 200, but it says that there's 206. You got to record this, the preferred source of information, even if it's wrong, you have to transcribe it, at least for rare books. And then you correct it if it's really necessary in that in those brackets. And then brackets again, because there's 12 additional unnumbered leaves, and that corresponds to our D4 back here. That's going to be those 12 unnumbered leaves. Make sure that is 12. So we can just count. We're going to count this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So yeah, that makes sense because this is so this is page 200 or folio or leaf 200, numbered 200, that CC that we get, and then we get our index alphabeticus, alphabetical index. That actually becomes important. And luckily to make it easy, it starts at signature C. So we actually can make our note here, includes index on quires C through D. In your fixed fields, which I said we're not really going to cover, but in the fixed field, there's actually one that is just for, is there an index or not? You write 0 if there's an index, and you type in 1 if there is. Sorry, you write 0 if there's no index, and write 1 if there is an index. If you write 1 that there is an index, you have to put a 500 note in saying that there's an index, and ideally where. But in this case, on quire C through D. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I think I was accidentally muting my mic, so I might have gone in and out for the last little bit. But what I basically said was there's an index from quires C on these like C and D here on the right, C and D, and here, this is all an index, and that actually gets noted. If you're really curious, which I know you are, the fixed fields get represented here, and the one that's going to tell us that we have an index is, I think, this one right here. That one right there. I want to zoom in, not out. I don't think I can. Okay, yeah. I think this one is telling us that we have an index. Might be this one, but actually it might be this one. Tells us we have an index. But hopefully you don't have to, you should never have to read this straight. So we've gotten through the hardest part. The rest is just, so there's some other little details, but you know, it is what it is. We've covered this. Oh, we have the title. Okay. Take a break for a minute and then come back. You can pause it here, and we're going to go over title page transcription and just transcription in general. Okay. Rare book title page transcription. I saw a class being taught at the Rare Book School, California. And it was like a $900 class just on title page transcription. And that blew my mind. Because, yes, it's difficult, but at the same time, like, wow. Like, why can't there just be a video going through a few title page transcriptions and you get the hang of it? And that's how most people learn and stuff. But, like, wow. Imagine that. You pay someone $1,000 to teach you how to write how to transcribe a title page. So I hope this is helpful. I just want to see one page at a time so it could be bigger. Okay. So the way we transcribe a title page, I'm going to switch to a regular pen because we transcribe it to just regular Roman script. That'll be fine. So you do kind of have to know, ideally you know a bit of Latin. Actually, you can't really, I don't think you can fully transcribe it correctly if you don't know some Latin, but I'll walk you through it because there's plenty of things written in English in this black letter script, and the rules kind of stay the same. So what we see here, the structure of this title page, is we have this thing here that kind of descends, and this is all a title. And then we have this like printer's device is what it's called. And then we have the publication statement. So we're just going to transcribe everything and then we can put it where it needs to be in the actual fields of Mark. So we start one letter at a time. Se, ra, p, h, I, c, I. Serafiki. And you're going to be like, well, what is that letter? That's an R. They do have, see this R right here in Patris on the next line. Looks like the R that we're familiar with, but sometimes just out of that's just how they do it. Sometimes the R looks like this backwards S with like a line coming down on it. That's an R, so we transcribe it in our regular way. Doc, tor, regular R, is. If we have like a N, like a thing basically saying, oh, like a dash, a hyphen, we don't transcribe the hyphen. Be, T, remember those long S's? That's not an F. And this is why you kind of, unfortunately, in this case, you might really be much better off knowing Latin, because you know that you know when it's an S and when it's an F. F is pretty rare in Latin, so you probably would be actually good almost changing all of those to S's, and then if it really doesn't make sense, you could try an F. So that's a tip. So beatissimi patris, and then that's a B, a capital B. Bona. Okay, here's where it gets complicated. I'm gonna rewrite bona. Bona. Big question here. This gets like a whole page in the manual of descriptive cataloging for rare materials of books. I might actually be able to pull it up. Let's see. DCRM books. If I can find it, that'd be great. There's like a chart in here. If I can't find it, I'll just tell you. I think it's towards the beginning. Nope. Could also be in, I think they have the same chart in descriptive cataloging for materials manuscripts. It would be the same rules. I'll try to put a timestamp in, at least for YouTube, to say when you can skip over this. I suppose I should have had it prepared, because let's actually just, let's see how to catalog. Yeah, okay. I might just do the search. Okay. DCRM title page transcription. That's not even gonna get me what I need, is it? No? Okay. Okay then. The rule. The rule is I shouldn't have even bothered with that. It's really simple. U versus V. V when it's at the beginning of a word. U everywhere else. You also can have VV for W, because sometimes it's written out VV when they want to make it a W. Doesn't really happen in Latin because that's not really a character, but in like English, it's a character, and sometimes they'll just use two V's instead of actually making a new W letter, because why? Just we have two V's, it's the same thing. W is actually double U, but the U's are written as V's, so that's why we get W. That doesn't apply here, so I'm not going to put it there. So that's U versus V. And the other one that is important is, we'll go over when we get to it. So bone, na, so we write a U. N, tu, re, or, dinis. This is a capital F, fratrum, minorum, comma, super, Psalmo, Salmo. And so that's actually, you kind of need to know that even though they don't use the hyphen there, this is one word. Salmo is one word. Ken, te, ooh, okay. So this is another thing where it gets, you, and I actually should have started here. So in Latin, they leave out a lot of letters when they're printing and writing. There's actually an A there, so it's not Bonaventure, it's Bonaventurae. And then Ordinis, Super Salmo, and then CE, this line over the E, usually means an N. Sometimes it can also mean an M. So it's not Ketesimo, it's Kin de Simo Decimo Octavo, or U, colon, SCZ. What? Again, we replace it with the actual word in this case, which is ski licket. Licket. Of course. Unfortunately. Beati Immaculati. And then another thing, this weird symbol right here is actually, so this symbol, it's sometimes written like this, or like this, or like this, is the same thing as, and it actually gets transcribed as an ampersand. So this is what's called a Tironian et, and you'll see this all the time. I'm already like at an hour and a half. I'm not gonna explain what the Tironian et is, but what you need to know is that when you see this weird character, and it's often written, you know how we say like etc. This is actually etc. So the way it looks here is et cetera is equal to etc., which is equal to etc. The way we transcribe it precisely is we change the Tironian et to a ampersand. And then we write the C dot. And then we continue. Per. And it looks like it's one word, but it's really two different words. So you just have to know that. Per celebris. Again, Tironian et, ampersand. Et. And that's an F, that's not an S. It's not magnifica, it's magnifica. Magnifica expolito. Expolito. Period. So that is your title page transcription. When you come over here, this is how it looks like we'll do the, yeah. This is how it looks like here. So you do 245 is your title field. And then 1 means that there is a 100 field. A 0 would mean that the title is actually filling in for like the 100, or sometimes it's a 110 or 20, 130. It's actually filling in for that. In this case, we have the 100, so we can just say 1, and it tells the cataloging system to file it by this main entry. Here we get, and then 0 just means like there's no A and the day, just like filler words at the beginning, or articles at the beginning. So here's the finished transcription. Centesimo decimo octavo. And then the B here, basically it splits up because it kind of splits up from like the main part of the title to kind of like the extra part. That's what we use the B for. Yes, there should be like a C here with the statement of responsibility, but since we're for rare books, we're transcribing, they don't have a statement of responsibility. If they say magna exposito a bonaventuram, then, or as a bonaventura, then you would have the C, but there's no C. And for people who don't know markets, the statement of responsibility in subfield C, we don't have it here because it actually, this is technically the statement of responsibility, but since it's an essential, grammatically inseparable part of the title. It's a kind of a mouthful, but basically it's a part of the title that's essential to the title. We transcribe it as if it's part of the title and not part of the statement of responsibility, because we end up getting that in the 1 or 700 field anyway, so we're not like losing anything by not using it in that way. And that's one big difference that you have in RDA. If you're following just RDA purely, RDA really wants you to, I think, have that statement of responsibility, whereas DCRM is going to let you basically follow whatever the book is actually saying. I have a 246 here, and this is basically taking out all of the, because this makes it actually really hard to search if you have a bunch of brackets. Sometimes like it's half brackets, so this actually just makes it easier to, if you're just trying to type in what you think, if you know, here's the thing, like if you know Latin and you're trying to fill in the letters, this makes it so that the search result will actually come up. This is because you have to be precise. Like that's the most important thing, is to precisely describe what is happening. But you need this extra 246 subfield 3 to basically do like a normalized title. I've also seen it originally was cataloged under Exposizione in Psalmum 118, or CXVIII. But I also saw it in this like Latin thing referring to it. It referred to it as this title. So this one just means like other extra title. And that just helps, maybe someone found it here and they found it under title Exposizione in Psalmum centesimo decimo octavo, and they're going to search for it that way. So I made sure that they would be able to find it if they searched for it from a name that it's also known by. These are things that are really important in rare book catalog, because you don't know how or where someone's going to discover something. So if it's a reasonable way, you need to include it somewhere so that someone can find it. So we have our 264. So this is a local practice to basically use 264 nothing 1 as we just say that's the publication statement for the book. We don't use 260, we use 264 generally at the UIUC RBML. Like I said, I'm not representing, I'm just saying that's what I've been told. That's our local practice. And what's not local practice is this here. And we have to go back to the book to finish this up. So we should be done within about 10 minutes, I think. We have to do another transcription. So we're going to transcribe this. The end here, we're actually not going to, but I'll show you just because. So we do that like C thing here. We don't transcribe because it's just kind of like saying new section starting. This is pro stat. So like brought forth, apud at Claudium. Oh, and that's actually, it's not Claudii, it's Claudi. That's a U with the slash on it. So it's a M in this case. Apud Claudi U M in brackets. CHEU, even though it's a V, even though it's Chevalon, we transcribe it as Shu Lon. Sub Sole. And so for capitalization, even though it's a capital S there, apparently, we regularize the capitalization. Sole aureo in. So this is where we're going to use a V, not a U. Via. Because it's the beginning of the word. Ad D D U Dium. Ya, because it's a name, we're going to capitalize Ya Ko Bu M. Supply the M. Et sub imagine di divi, and this is Cristofori. So it looks like a U, but that's actually an R and then an I. There's actually a dot on the I if you look close. Cristofori e regione colleghi. Okay, and then so you have I. So I equals J. However, like I said earlier, I always gets transcribed as IJ at the end of a word or by itself. Even if they use IJ in the middle of a word, it always gets transcribed as I, or at the beginning of a word, I, regardless. And if you use capitals, it's always I. It's never IJ. Even if they use IJ in capitals, you always transcribe I. So that's the rule here. And actually, it frustrates me because that's the rule. So there is an alternative rule in DCRM for books. You can transcribe exactly what it says, but the standard is actually to apply these regular transformations. So you just have to go with it. So e regioni collegii Cameracensis. Cameracensis. And this last part is cum privilegio ad biennium, with the privilege. You don't transcribe privilege statements. You can put that in a note, but I chose not to. Just not going to deal with that right now. And so this ends up here in the B. Now, why in the B? Well, the A is supposed to be the location, the B is the publication statement, and the C is the date. If you notice, so I actually really like this. So what this publication statement is saying is it's kind of a little vapid. It's brought forth at Claudius Chevallon's place of printing, basically, below the golden sun in the road at the of like the divine Jacob, or like the very rich esteemed Jacob, and below the image of like the Dewey Christopher from the region of the Collegii, like the College of Camaracensis, which I think is it's somewhere in France, but it's Camaracensis, which I guess you could say like, wow, well, of course that's, but um, actually need to go to the colophon, and the colophon is not the preferred source of information, but if it's a better source, you do use it. So here, oh boy, one more thing of transcription. This one's harder. Again, we're not going to do that little C paragraph mark. It's basically a Pilcrow. But we're going to transcribe Paris C. So it says Paris C IJS. You wouldn't be wrong if you transcribed it that way. You'd be applying the alternative. But with the standard DCRMB regularization, you do this here, even though it's a J in the source. And you don't silently correct, you just silently correct it. You don't make any notes or anything. Okay. This says, if you write it exactly, which you can't really, in Mark, it looks like this. So this means US, pretty much always. This little like 9 at the end of a word means US. Us. I happen to know that edibus, so in this medieval Latin, the AE sound is the same as E, so they write, it's kind of like English didn't have a standard spelling. So they're just like, well, Oedipus. Oedipus sounds the same as Oedipus. And so the correct spelling is Aedibus. Like the standard spelling is Aedibus. But that's like with our modern restored classical pronunciation, we make that distinction. They didn't make that distinction. So, but I like to supply it. Not everyone agrees with me, so that's kind of a matter of opinion. Because but in some places it does get corrected to aedibus. So Paris is in aedibus Claudii. Now we can use the J. Schwalon. Calco, and I'm not going to write the rest out. I think we've gone far enough there, but it's calcografi accuratissimi anno domini millesimo quingentesimo vicesimo quarto mense aprili. Just aprili. And then I actually don't, this might be like a chronogram or something, but I'm not gonna even touch that. So that's actually like what, as a cataloger, you have to decide what you're just not gonna touch. Like, look, I know it's there, but I've already done so much work. This is like already a great description. We just have to stop. So we figured out, and when you put it in the brackets, you don't put the Paris, you correct it to just Paris. And then 1524, this in the year of our Lord 1540 24. That's how it works. So you just write 1524. There's some weird rules about if it actually is in the publication statement written out that you actually. So it's one of those things where that's one of the things I blows my mind. But I think you're actually expected to turn it into like Roman numbers, not sorry, into English or Arabic numerals, the 1524. But you're allowed to, if you really want to, yeah, you could transcribe it. But I would prefer transcribing it because that's what we're doing. But they're like, well, if it's just a date, just transcribe it. So, or just write the date. Don't bother transcribing it. But we know what it means. So these are kind of the debates that catalogers have amongst each other, and they get fought out in the documentation of like these, you know, DCRMB and RDA and Mark, not so much Mark, but an RDA, and it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So it gets kind of crazy like that. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. Last couple things, wrapping it up. 510 with a first indicator of 4. What this is saying is, let's see if I can zoom in. Yeah, hopefully that helps you. 510 with the first indicator of 4 means that you're using a citation. And so this reference book, they're usually reference book. This reference book happens to reference this book. Yes. So catalog of books printed on the continent of Europe, 1501 to 1600, in Cambridge libraries. And in that book, it's number B2407, because that's just what the number they gave it is. We can note that there's a title page printed in red and black. That's just a description that sometimes that they think is important. In this case, we have a printer's device of Claude Chevalon on title page containing. So I didn't come up with this description exactly. I looked up the guy and I looked up like Claude Chevalon printer's device. I Googled this. And then I see, okay. So it turns out they have this is a citation. I'm not making a 510 with a 4 note for the printer's device, but I'm just saying you can look up this person in printer's device number 176 describes the title page. Printer's devices containing horses, grapes, a sun, shields, circle, and crosses. So I just thought that would be nice to put in the note since I already went and found the information. And I think that is a good description. You got grapes, sun, horses, shields, circles, cross. Great. We already talked about the index. A 520 note it's a really nice thing to have. If you only do like one note and you don't do like all these title page this and that, put in a 5. If you can do it, put in a 520. A 520 is a scope note, and this is really like you're distilling and explaining, giving context for the book. What is it? In this case, it's a commentary on Psalm 119. In the Vulgate, the reason why up there it says it's 118 is because in the Vulgate, the Latin edition, it's of the Bible, it's Psalm 118. The numbers are a little different. And it's an acrostic poem of the Hebrew alphabet. And you can go look up, if you go look at your Bible, it. It'll actually, a lot of them will actually print the Hebrew letters, because like that's what the poem is in Hebrew. So that's not even, that's just like me explaining what's going on there. The work was attributed to Bonaventure. Sorry for the cutoff there. Bonaventure, or Bonaventura, Saint Bonaventure, whatever you want to call him. Um, but it was likely written by Jean de Languedoc, Bishop of Limoges, died in 1541. This book is the first printed edition of the work. For more information, see this book here, Doctoris Seraphici Omnia Opera, Tomus 6. And I gave some, it's a very informal citation here, and then pages Roman numeral 4 to 5. I actually had to, this is like some really old work in Latin that I had to kind of slog through and find information about this book. And that's actually where I got that it's actually not Bonaventure. So I don't have to be embarrassed about saying, oh, I found a new work. Oh, I found, oh. So I don't have to be embarrassed by saying, oh, I found a new work by Bonaventure. And they're like, no, that's, we figured that out over 100 years ago. It's not by him. Okay, okay. And query 1 over the 752. So that gives you out of after yikes, sorry. After 1 hour and 51 minutes and 30 seconds, we've cataloged, done an original record for one book. So that's just something to think about when you're thinking about the economics of cataloging. And obviously, if every book had this great of metadata, we could just find so much information so much very easily. It would actually be better than full text searching in a lot of ways. But it's just not practical. We'd have to just round up people and train them to be rare book catalogers if we wanted to actually catalog libraries in this kind of good way. And that's why we have, WorldCat, and we have all of these consortia that are trying to pull the work together. But even with all the people who work on this in the world, we can only get a very small fraction of items actually cataloged to this kind of like good level of standard. And it's unfortunate, but that's how it is. I find it satisfying, and I hope this video is helpful to you and doesn't scare you off, and more gets you interested in wanting to let me know if you want to see more examples. I can find more examples, and maybe in future videos I'll be less verbose and just kind of go through and eventually maybe we could do like a speed run through. I've tried to do that on my own and see like, well, what's the fastest I can do an original record that hits all these main points that you really need to have still. But it's really a different challenge with every book. So a speed run for some obscure book that is in Russian or something is going to be a lot different than a speed run of another book like this that's very similar. And I don't need to research, like, I know that it's written by some person. I don't need to have to question that. It's going to be a lot faster. Could maybe be like 30 minutes or something. Otherwise, feel free to correct me in the comments. I've only been doing this for like a year, very part-time. But it's something that I think I'm at a point where I can share this kind of knowledge. And again, if you feel inspired to catalog rare books, or I hope you feel empowered to not have to like grovel at the door of some senior cataloger to teach you for free or something, like like I think there should be more videos out there that you can kind of sit with someone and go through a book, because that's how you learn it. But you don't always, like, I don't even have access to these books at home, and I don't have time at work to be making these kind of videos um, live for people. Um, they're also trying to do similar videos like this officially at the Rare Book and Manuscript Library. Um, and I've seen them. They're pretty good. We're having different approaches. For me, I want to be extremely verbose. I want to give you every little detail as if I'm sitting next to you and going through it with you. For them, it's more of like a overview of kind of like the main points of just like one little bit. Um, I'm more of a fan of this, just like let's just throw everything at you and see what happens. So I'm going to end it there, and thank you for watching all or part of this, and I hope you have a great day.